Welcome back to the Literary Lounge. I'm Emily,
And I'm Paige.
and today we are back on a Wednesday to talk about the book The Push by Ashley Audrain. And the cocktail we've come up with for today is called Naughty Mom Fuel. So, no judgments, but it's coffee with some vodka in it. It's got also a little bit of Bailey's and some caramel syrup.
It's really good.
Just what you need as a mom to take the edge off
Yeah,
after a long day. So that's our drink. Before we get into this book, we actually wanted to try something a little bit different today, just for you guys to get to know us a little bit better. Often we've just been kind of jumping right into the books, and so we figured we'd start every episode with a question of the week. So today's question, Paige, is what is your Starbucks order? Kind of on theme with like our coffee cocktail today.
Yeah. I kind of changed it up. So right now, I'm really stuck on the brown sugar oat milk shaken espresso.
That's so good. I
So
love
good.
that.
Has to be light ice, so you get a little more in there.
Yeah, you cheat the system.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm kind of like all over the place. So summer, I usually get. Actually, I'd probably get this one in the summer. Winter, my favorite drink from Starbucks is the chestnut praline latte, and I literally will get that all winter. And then eggnog lattes from Caribou, which is because Starbucks doesn't have eggnog anymore during the winter. But yeah, right now I'm on the brown sugar oat milk shaken espresso. What's your Starbucks order?
I usually get a cold brew, and then I'll just either get like a splash of like hazelnut syrup if I just want something like really basic. Like it has to have like a little bit of flavor in it, but usually I don't do any kind of milk. But sometimes if I am feeling like kind of something a little bit sweeter, I'll do like oat milk instead of hazelnut.
Yeah.
But it's super basic just because for some reason I'm not really into lattes.
Really?
They're just like way too sugary for me and way too like milky.
So whenever I get lattes, I always get a little or a little less of the syrup.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
kind of like tell them to alter the recipe a little bit.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because they can be really sweet.
I watched this video on Instagram the other day. This guy, he like talks about like healthy foods and drinks, and then he'll like show you how much sugar is in certain things. And he did like a Starbucks thing, and he showed you like how much sugar they put in a latte, and it was like
That's mean.
a lot. It looked like literally a quarter of a cup of just straight sugar.
Yuck.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, that explains why it's so sweet though.
Yeah. I always get like less syrup.
Yeah. I think it's just because like I have such a touchy stomach in the morning that like coffee is already being risky, like on an empty stomach. But then when I add like dairy to it or sugar, like I'm a goner.
Yeah, not good.
So anyway, TMI, but
all right. Well, should we dive in?
yeah, let's get started. So, The Push by Ashley Audrain starts out with the narrator, Blythe. She's sitting in her car and she's watching this family through the window. It's like Christmas time. So, she's watching them like gathered around a fire, Christmas tree. I don't know if they're maybe opening gifts or something, but she's narrating it in second person point of view. And we learn from this narration that she's watching her like ex-husband through the window with his like new family. But we don't know a lot about them like this early on. We just know that she's not with him anymore and he has like moved on. And she says something along the lines of like, our daughter looks just like you. So then we also learn like the little girl in the image is like her daughter.
Yeah.
And she's spying on them, and she has like I don't know if it's like a letter or like a transcript of some sort, but she's like, I've come to tell like my side of the story. So she's there.
Mic drop.
Yeah. So you're like, okay, something like big happened between these two.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually liked the beginning of the book where like you're trying to piece all this information together, because I know she like goes back in time a little bit to like tell their story. But I liked trying to like piece together what she was talking about in that first chapter. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, because you're always like remembering back to that. You're like, because then it starts to dive into like how they met and then like their life together, and you're like, well, I know this is gonna end.
Yeah. Yeah. So after that scene, the book is still told from Blythe's perspective, as if she's talking to her husband, Fox. So she, again, talks about how they met in college and how everything was really going well when they dated. And she tells us that she was an aspiring writer and he is an architect. And she's kind of had like family issues growing up, and she found his family is like super welcoming and he has like a good relationship with his family. So she was really inspired by that, and she kind of liked having that those family dynamics being invited into her life through him.
Yeah, he kind of has the exact opposite of what we quickly learn she had growing up. Like he had supportive parents that were very present.
Yeah.
They're super excited about her like in Fox's life. And so she's just getting everything that she wanted in life.
Child.
Yeah, like having this like family
Mm-hmm.
dynamic. So then they get married. I think it was just really with his family. Like I don't think she really had anybody there. Like
She doesn't really have anyone to
yeah.
invite.
Yeah, and he like right away wanted to start having kids. And she like we'll dive into this next, but she has like kind of a long line of bad moms in her like ancestry basically. And so she's like a little bit hesitant about it, but I think like because she's so in love with him, she's just like if this is what you want, like I will gladly like be a mom.
Yeah.
And I think she's like open to the idea too. Like it wasn't something she was ever a hard no on, but she's definitely like going into it like a little bit skeptical. Like how am I going to do like with this role?
Yeah, her concerns are valid too. I mean, she knows about her grandmother and how her grandmother treated her mom and then how her mom treated her. She has valid concerns that she's scared she's going to like mess up. And
yeah, we should talk about those because like throughout the book she weaves in like these flashbacks of like her grandma and then like her mom and how her mom was to her. And so maybe we just cover that right now like in full, basically like what happened.
Yeah, so her grandmother's name is Etta. So she falls in love with an aspiring doctor when she's young, and he obviously he wants to be a doctor, but her dad doesn't want her to marry like I feel like that's successful. Like he wants them to work on the farm.
Yeah, he wants them to like take it over.
Yeah, and so he agrees that he'll take over the family's farm, but then he ends up being killed in a farm accident, which like sends Etta into like a depression.
Yeah.
But she finds out that she's like pregnant with his baby, and when she's super depressed, which she just kind of doesn't really treat her new baby Cecilia very well. She ends up remarrying, and then she continues to deal with like a lot of trauma and abuse. She abuses her daughter a lot. Like one example, she like attempts to drown her in the bathtub.
Yeah, she like held her head down. Like I think she was playing it off like she's gonna rinse her hair out, but then she was like down there for kind of a long time.
Did it say how old Cecilia was when Etta did that?
No, but I'm thinking she's probably pretty young.
Yeah.
Like if your mom's giving you a bath, like you're probably 4 around there, give or take a couple years.
Yeah. Another incident, she like locks her in the cellar, and like Cecilia's had like a thing with cellars ever since. Like she's like traumatized by them.
Yeah, and that was like premeditated because she took like one of Cecilia's, I think, dolls or like stuffed animals and puts it in the cellar and like sends her in there like, oh, your toy's in there, and like locks her in there for a couple hours.
Yeah.
It's just super
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm like super scared of basements. Like at this age, I cannot imagine as like well, I mean, I was scared of basements as a child too. Thank God there was never one in my house. But yeah, like terrifying. I would be absolutely terrified. I've seen way too many scary movies with like
yeah, I would be
basements.
Freaking out now.
Yeah.
As a 28-year-old locked in a cellar, I'd be like crying and screaming and like
I would have
deeply traumatized
panic attacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we find out Etta eventually hangs herself.
Yeah, she's like super unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got a lot of issues.
Yeah.
This entire time. I think she's on medication of some sort. I don't know if the author really gets into that too much, but
yeah, I can't remember.
Obviously they weren't helping. Yeah, so then meanwhile, this is kind of carried on then for Cecilia. So she's Blythe's mom. And just with like her history with her mom, she never wanted to be a mother. And we learn this like throughout the book. Like she didn't want Blythe. Um, she like she escaped her life like with her stepdad, and her mom had like obviously hung herself like when she was pretty young. So she like moves to the city and like wants to start fresh, and then ends up like getting pregnant with this baby, Blythe, who she ends up having. But she isn't very present for Blythe, and she just treats her like really bad. She has kind of like mood swings too. Like one minute she's kind of like showing some effort, and the next she's like she'll hit her, like she slaps her one time when she's like angry with her about something. And um, then there's like this other time where Blythe has like a, I don't know if it's like teacher parent conferences or it's like parents day, and her mom like shows up to it, but then is like, I don't know if she's like embarrassed during it or something, but she ends up like going home and like giving her the cold shoulder.
I think that incident was because she was forced to go there by her dad.
Oh,
Yeah, so Cecilia was forced to go to this parent. It was like a Valentine's, or no, it was Mother's Day.
oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
like
Yeah,
Mother's
you're
Day
right.
event. Yeah. And I think she just kind of, she was trying to make him happy by going there, but like she doesn't want anything to do with Blythe.
Yeah.
And once like Blythe started getting like all gushy towards her, like she kind of just left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then kind of around the same time too, like Blythe finds like a bloody mess in the toilet at their house, and her dad like tells her like, oh, your mom had a procedure. And there's like kind of things happening, like this man calling the house and like other hints of like infidelity. So then we learn that like Cecilia is cheating on Blythe's dad with this other man.
Mm-hmm.
And she's very unhappy just with like her life situation in general, and ends up like leaving the both of them for this new guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, Blythe's had it pretty rough too. I think around the age of 12, her mom reaches out to her kind of one last time, or rather reaches out to Blythe's dad when it's just the two of them and says, oh, I want to see Blythe. Like, she can come over to my house. And so
Yeah.
Blythe goes over there and like meets Richard, I think is like the new boyfriend or husband of Cecilia. And they don't really like have any bonding moments. So there's nothing really good that comes out of it. And then when Blythe's like leaving, then Cecilia kind of like, she's dressed like really nice, and she has like this new nice house, and is kind of like trying to flaunt it in front of like Blythe's dad when he comes
Mhm.
to pick her up. And so it wasn't really like an olive branch in any way to Blythe. Like it was more just like, I hope you tell your dad when you get home about like how nice my house is and like how much better off I am. Like,
Yeah, there was also a part during that scene when something happened. If his name was Richard, I cannot remember his name.
I think, yeah.
Okay. I think he again like tried to convince Cecilia to have a relationship with her daughter, because I think he said something like, or she said something to him like, see, I didn't want to do this, or I don't know. But
Oh,
it was like
okay.
something along those lines, like she's just, people are trying to like force her to have this like relationship with her, and
Yeah.
which is so bad for Blythe. Like either you're in it or you're not, you know.
Yeah.
Like, that's even more traumatizing to like step in and step out all the time than to just step out and like let her
Yeah.
get on with her life.
She never even really bothered to try to be a mom. Like,
No,
she just didn't want it, and
it's
she wasn't
everyone
gonna
else.
pretend.
Yeah, it's everyone else around her that wanted her to do that.
Yeah.
So like, which is kind of like another hidden meaning, like with the title too, like the push to, everyone's pushing you to be this mother when you can't
Oh,
like
yeah.
force that bond. Like if you don't have that bond and you don't even want to try, like you
Yeah.
can't force it.
Well, there's that part too, like, Blythe has that flashback where she's talking about how when she was younger, her mom was like brushing her hair or something, and she's like, Mom, I want to be a mommy one day. And Cecilia was like, you don't have to be a mom, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yeah.
I think is a valid thing to tell your child, but coming from her, it sounds horrible, right? Because like we know that she never wanted to be a mom, but I think it's okay to like communicate to your children that like not everybody has kids, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's horrible in our sense because like we know so much about Cecilia and her
Yeah.
past that like we know she's like not being a great mom to Blythe. But like telling your kid that I wouldn't see that as like being bad, or like maybe, I mean, Blythe could have put two and two together like
Yeah.
that hidden meaning that she didn't want to be a mom. But I think there's like this like social conditioning of like what in society of like what it is to be a mother and like what's expected of you to be a mother. And I think that her telling Blythe like, you know, you don't have to be a mom is like breaking that. And I think that's like good because you don't have to. And like I feel like as women, like we're just, yeah, we're conditioned like, okay, you have to be a mom. You have to be, you have to form this bond with your child. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of like being pushed into that when it could be something that you don't want, you know?
Right. Yeah. I guess the one good thing in Blythe's childhood is that she has the Ellingtons in the neighborhood. So they're a family of four. It's a mom, Mrs. Ellington is really the one that takes Blythe under her wing, but then there's the husband and the two sons. So Blythe goes over there like fairly frequently, maybe once a week to have dinner.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of like take her in and like treat her like a child, even though she doesn't live there and she's not there every day. Like she's still like being treated the same as like they treat their sons. And she gets a
Yeah,
little taste and a window into like what a healthy family looks like.
exactly.
And so like thank God she had Mrs. Ellington like looking out for her because it was kind of a saving grace in some way. Like do you think that she would have turned out a little bit differently like had Mrs. Ellington not like stepped in?
I think yes, because like look, I mean, we don't know the whole situation with Etta and Cecilia, but I'm assuming that Etta didn't have, or well, no, we don't know how Etta's mother was. I'm assuming that Cecilia didn't have that other mother figure in her life
Mm-hmm.
like Blythe did with Mrs. Ellington. So I think that's like why Cecilia turned out the way she is. But then like Blythe, she like has a different mindset in a sense going into motherhood. And like she wants to try to be like the best she can.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we find out like that doesn't work with her first child. But it's because she had that mother figure in her life with Mrs. Ellington. I feel like she was able to like have a different mindset going into motherhood with it.
Yeah, she had like one good role model.
Yeah.
So just kind of looking back on everything we just discussed between like the mom and the grandma, um, what do you think is going through like Blythe's head as far as like her concerns and stuff over like motherhood, just based on like the past?
So I think because her Blythe as a child, she like wanted to develop this bond with her mom, but her mom like wasn't giving that to her. Like her mom had wanted nothing to do with her. So I think Blythe's concern is that like she's gonna feel like her mother did, where like she's not gonna feel this bond at all. She's not gonna want to have anything to do with her child, and then she's gonna probably know because she went through this that her child's gonna be like trying to form this bond with her, and then I think like that's her concern with it. And like, I mean, she did go through abuse as a child too. So maybe she's like concerned that something's gonna flip in her and she's gonna accidentally like do something,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Like she's worried she will also be a bad mom, just like that
Yeah.
history's going to repeat itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think she goes into it like hoping that's not the case though.
Yeah,
And
for
that's
sure.
that's like a start at least, like
Yeah,
she wants to end this vicious cycle of bad moms.
exactly. And that's like what I meant earlier too. Like when I
Yeah.
said like she goes in like with a different mindset, like, yeah, she still has that concern, but she like wants it to change.
So getting back to the main story, then Blythe gets pregnant with her daughter Violet. And during the delivery, she actually has like a pretty tough time, and like she has this moment where like she's in so much pain and suffering that she like hopes her or the baby like is gonna die. Like she just wants it to be over,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of like, oh God, like
I feel like that's pretty common though.
yeah. And that's kind of like what I was wondering about when I was reading this is like I think I want to reread this book for a third time. This is the second time I've read this book, but I'm going to read it again once I have kids because I have so many questions for moms. Like,
Yeah.
is that normal? And then once Violet's born, like, they don't bond right away, which we think is like probably postpartum. Would you agree that's like what's happening here?
Yeah. And also, like, there's, I think, a lot of like misinformation. I think it's a beautiful thing that many mothers can like have an instant bond with their baby, but that's not always the case, and that
Mhm.
didn't happen with Blythe. I just think it's kind of like expected of mothers like right when their baby's born to like instantly have a bond, and like I
Yeah.
said, that's just like not always the case.
Yeah.
You have to some have to like create that bond and like
Yeah. Totally. I think like there's just kind of this like you said, expectation of new moms, but I don't
mhm.
think postpartum is like talked about enough and how like kind of common it can be.
Yeah, yeah. Postpartum depression is very common, and I definitely think that Blythe has it,
Mhm.
and I don't think she realizes it.
Yeah.
And I think the instant that you start to have any feelings of being like unhappy, like, because usually, I'm not saying this is expected, but
Mhm.
usually, like, you would think that you would be super happy that your baby's like finally here into the world. If you have any like signs of any unhappiness and like any thoughts that you're like wishing maybe like this didn't happen, go get help. Cause like
Yeah.
that's a big sign of postpartum depression, and that puts your baby and yourself and everyone around you in danger. So
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, she really struggles with like new mom life, and she gives up her career to be a stay-at-home mom. Like that's what Fox wants of her. Like it's obvious that his like whole plan when they got married is like to create this
baby
I
trap her.
yeah, it's like his ideal image of what a family looks like, which is the husband, him going to work full time, supporting the family, and having like a stay at home mom, which that's fine. There's a lot of families that that's what makes sense. I think he kind of pushed her into it maybe without really talking to her about it. And she kind of just went along with it because she was like, I love him so much. And like, maybe this would be a good thing. Like, I don't think she really had too many issues with it from the start, but like
Yeah.
when she's in the moment now as like a new mom, like she's exhausted, she's upset, like which again, these are all like normal things that new moms go through, like the over like just being so tired all the time. Like she has like this one moment in like a coffee shop with another mom where they both like have young babies and they kind of look at each other like I know exactly how you're feeling right now.
Yeah.
And she actually like drops the pacifier like that she was going to give to Violet like on the ground of this like coffee shop, and she doesn't wipe it off and she like puts it in Violet's mouth, and the other mom like sees her do it and is just like, I'm not judging you at
That's
all. I don't know. I don't know about that, but
yeah.
yeah, I think it that moment in the book is kind of trying to show that like she's going through some very normal feelings even though she maybe feels really isolated.
Yeah. Definitely. And another like going back a little bit to like what you said about like how Fox is like wanting her to do this. And in a previous podcast, I mentioned about how like um friends of mine and my husband's, the father of the children forces the mom to stay home. She like wants to go back to work, but he doesn't want her to. Like I think it's like a 1950s housewife. Like the
Yeah.
world isn't like that anymore. And like I think it should be agreed upon. Like if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, all for it. Like
Right.
go ahead. Like there's no judgment. I think a stay-at-home mom is literally a full-time job. And if you're also not a stay-at-home mom, like mothering is literally a full-time job. Breastfeeding alone is a full-time job.
Yeah.
It's actually longer than a full-time, like it's more than 40 hours a week. So I am fully supportive, like whatever you want to do, but I just hate how there's like still in this modern day, like there's this expectation that by some people that you should stay at home as a mother.
Yeah, and that the mother is like the primary caregiver
Yep.
to these young children.
I love that there's like stay-at-home dads now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really cute. And again, like there's no judgment if you're a stay-at-home mom. I would probably like to be a stay-at-home mom, but I also am a business owner, so I can't really do that. I mean, I kind of can, but kind of can't. But like, yeah, this expectation is just terrible. Like if your partner is like forcing you to stay home, I think you should like have a conversation, because that should not be like normal. You should
Yeah.
have your own you should make your own decision about that. That's not healthy in
Right.
a
That needs to be
relationship.
talked about for sure. Everybody involved needs to be up for that
Mhm.
dynamic. But um, yeah, Fox just pisses me off so much because, like,
Same.
he is so critical of her and like her new mothering like role. Like there's that one time where I think she like puts her headphones in and is like kind of writing or like doing something that was like part of her old job for like over 2 hours. And Violet's just like screaming from her crib this whole time. And he gets home and like finds her.
Okay, so that I have some. I think she was in the wrong for that because I think she heard
Yeah,
Violet crying and then she put her headphones in. And
Yeah.
the fact that she was still crying after, I think that can be like a sense of trauma for the child.
Yeah, that's
And
like an item that I was kind of back and forth on where I was like, I know that like parents will kind of let their babies cry for a little bit and then they'll go get them. But it's like,
yes,
that seems like a really long time to
two
let it go
hours
on.
is a long
Especially
time.
when she's little, like maybe she needs to be fed, maybe she needs to be changed. Like
And
there's needs there.
okay, so yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's different that if you know your baby just ate, just changed, they're probably crying because they're being fussy.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to let them cry, not for 2 hours, probably
It's
not
like
even
2 hours and
not even
45
an hour.
minutes.
I would probably let the baby cry maybe 15 minutes. If they're still crying, then go get them, see what's wrong. But or at least check on them. Like you don't know why that baby's crying. She could like have her blanket over her head. You don't know. Like she
Yeah.
could be struggling, but like babies need to be nurtured
Mm-hmm.
and they need that closeness to develop like that bond. And at this point, like I was really pissed at Blythe because like she's not even trying at that point. Like
Yeah, that was kind of a crappy moment on her part. And like, he freaks out at her for it, which I can understand how he's upset. There's obviously like just some real issues going on between the two of them though. Like,
their communication's off.
yeah, he just doesn't like understand like her position at
Okay.
all.
And it's stupid too because she's a writer. Like you can do that at home. Like you can do that like when the baby's sleeping. Like it's
Mhm.
not like she's like going to work like in like an office or anything.
Yeah.
Like why are you not letting her like even write? Like she can do that at home and
Yeah.
still be stay-at-home mom.
Right.
Yeah, it's annoying.
Yeah. So I guess with all this like that's going on as she's transitioned to motherhood, like do you think the things that she's going through or doing is normal for new moms? I mean, we don't know, right? We don't have children. We've never been moms before. Like, is there anything that seems normal to you or things that you're like, that probably wasn't very good?
Yeah, from an outside perspective, I don't think that was very good.
The like leaving her to scream for 2
Yeah,
hours. Yeah.
yeah. I'm trying to think back, like what other incidents
I mean,
did
there's
she
like the
have?
coffee shop thing and then
Oh, I
how,
think that's normal.
yeah.
I would hope I would wipe it off, but
Yeah.
like if you're tired, like you never know. I
Build
think that's pretty.
immunity,
That's pretty.
you're
Yeah,
build
yeah. That's
expose
pretty
your
normal.
child to the
But
elements.
then also, how old was Violet at that time? Was she
She was
like
a
a
baby.
newborn though, or was she like a year old? You know,
Yeah, I
I
don't
think that's
remember.
different because like their immune systems are like nothing when they're newborns.
Yeah.
So I think that's different.
Yeah.
But if she's like a little older, at least her immune system is like developed a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to like think back of like the other incidents that happened.
I think just like to summarize everything is like aside from the screaming incident and like that was not very good and I think there's probably other instances of that too where she kind of neglects her. I
Yeah.
Which kind of makes me uncomfortable to read about, but I think like the part where she's so exhausted and she feels like she's lost her identity a little bit, like those seem to be normal things for new moms, at least like I wouldn't
Exactly.
know,
And
but
I think that aligns with postpartum too.
yeah.
And another thing too is like if you are like frustrated and you don't like it, like she's dealing with postpartum, like if you are like super frustrated, I think it's safer for the baby to let them cry for a bit. Again, not for 2 hours, but like shaken baby syndrome is like a serious thing and when I think it's okay to like let the baby cry if you're like feeling just like too many emotions because shaken baby syndrome can be deadly.
Yeah.
And I think it aligns with the feelings that she was like having. And so I think it was like good to let her cry for a little bit, just not for 2 hours.
Yeah. I think too, like, because she kind of seems on her own with this thing. Like, her husband's at work all day. She doesn't have her own mother to turn to. She has her mother-in-law who kind of helps out. Like, she hired them that like night nurse for a while.
Yeah.
Just to help like get her some sleep. I think her heart was in the right place when she did that. She didn't consult Fox and Blythe about it though. Like, she just like hired the night nurse without like saying anything. But for the most part, it just kind of seems like she doesn't have any friends or family to really like talk to about things. So,
Exactly.
and with her insecurities that she's already having like from her own childhood, like I think she's really getting in her head about everything and is maybe like telling herself like, I'm not cut out for this. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's just a lot going on here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, kind of moving on from that, as Violet gets a little bit older, like into her toddler years, she starts to show like instances of violence. Like the first one being Blythe's at the house with her mother-in-law and she's giving Violet a bath and Violet's being like super fussy. And Violet actually bites Blythe like on the face when she's trying to like wash her or dry her off or something. And her mother-in-law like witnesses the whole thing and is like, oh my God. Like, but she tells her like, oh, it's normal. Like, she's just, acting up. She's having a temper tantrum. Like,
I think it's good to preface too that Violet doesn't act this way towards Fox ever, only towards Blythe. So,
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, another evening, Violet tells Blythe that she's gonna hurt Noah, which is a kid at school. This is when she's a little bit older. And the next day, she finds like hair in Violet's pocket. And when she went to go pick her up at school, she noticed like Noah was crying to his mom, and the hair was like the same color as his hair.
Yeah, and he was like, he had gotten his head shaved or something.
Yeah,
like because then she puts two and two together. Like,
chunk.
he had like a big chunk of hair missing. His mom probably like shaved his head. Yeah, and then the third thing, which is pretty serious, but Blythe like is at the playground with Violet one day, and she like swears that she saw Violet like trip this kid on like the playground set, and he fell and like died.
Yeah,
and it was like this whole thing. Like, the ambulance came, people were being questioned on like what they saw happen, and she was kind of like not exactly sure what she saw. So I think she like told the police or whatever, like, oh, he just fell, like I didn't really see what happened. And
exactly.
And that's like kind of the first big thing where we're like, holy shit, like this kid, there's something going on here.
Yeah. And she like showed no remorse or like anything during that time.
I know. It's crazy.
At first I kind of like was thinking like, yeah, because like we're getting Blythe's perspective and I'm like, is she like going a little crazy? Like, is she like wanting to find like
faults?
Yeah, in Violet. So yeah, like I was like, did she actually see that, or is she just like looking for reasons to not develop this bond with Violet, or like why this bond isn't developing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know. That was definitely a makes you think kind of thing. So with all this happening, like Fox is just really not like seeing what Blythe is seeing, because like you said, he's bonding with Violet. Like when he comes through the door at the end of his workday, like she's like so happy to see him, wants to snuggle with him, whereas like with Blythe, like Violet just doesn't want anything to do with her. So how did you feel about Fox at this point and like how he treats Blythe?
He's a manipulative gaslighter.
Yeah, that's like, exactly the way that I would describe him.
Yeah. And we find out something later on in the book too, which I guess I could just mention. But like one time, like when Violet was young, Blythe's like clothes all went missing, and like later on, like Fox brings up that he found Violet like in the closet cutting up all her clothes. So like he knew that she was like off. But like, and he knew this like when she was younger, but he still like gaslit Blythe this whole time.
Yeah.
Which is so messed up.
And when he was like telling her about that at the end of the book, he was like laughing.
Yeah.
And she, at this, like back in time when this was happening, like she was telling Fox like something's really off with Violet. Like she's violent, she's like angry, and he was, like you said, gaslighting her. And then for him to like go into the closet and find that Violet's cut up all of Blythe's clothes, like I would hope like that my husband in that situation would be furious.
Yeah, exactly. And like we'll talk about the end of the book later on. But she like developed this connection with Fox's new wife, kind of. And we hear from Fox's wife, Gemma, was it? At the end of the book. And I think when we get to that, I'll bring it up more. But like I want to know Fox's perspective.
Yeah.
During that. Like, does he catch on to Violet?
Yeah.
You know? But
yeah.
I don't like Fox.
Yeah, me neither. He just is not supportive at all.
Yeah.
He just blames her for everything.
Exactly.
Like, even if she is an unreliable main character, where like he's seeing things that she's maybe not telling us in her narrative, like it's just like he's not looking out for her at all. He's not communicating. He's not trying to like bring them all together. Like if her and Violet are having like relationship issues, like he needs to like step in and help them figure it out. I don't know what that would be. Therapy probably for Blythe, but like holy cow, he just like he sucks.
But we don't know like if Blythe is unreliable yet. And like I just think Fox is just delusional too. Like he just I don't know. I don't understand him. So like moving on, Blythe and Fox have a second child, Sam. And Blythe has like the complete opposite relationship with this child. Like she has an immediate bond with Sam. And they like she's like obsessed with him like during his like toddler year or infant years. Like she is obsessed. Like she cannot get enough of him. Like she thinks about him constantly all through the day. And Violet's just kind of like there and a little shit sometimes.
Yeah, just kind of watching the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was kind of interesting because Blythe wanted the second child way more than Fox did.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe why that would be is because like around the time that Sam was born, like we see a little bit of a hint of like that he's seeing somebody else. Where like he takes Violet to work one day with him. I'm not sure why. I think like Blythe needed to do something with Sam or whatever and needed to get like Violet out of the house. And so Fox and Violet go to lunch with like Fox's new receptionist. And like she buys Violet like this pencil and like unicorn eraser that Violet like loves and like cherishes. She like never uses it because it like means something to her. And so, I mean, when we're reading this, I don't know about you, but I was like, he's like, he's cheating on her.
Yeah,
he's
definitely.
going to like, he likes this woman.
Yeah.
But Blythe's pretty like trusting. Like she's like, oh, I didn't know you got a new receptionist, but like doesn't really go any further than that. Like isn't too worried about it. Just kind of like wanting to know like how their lunch went.
Yeah. And I think too, like going, because again, like we're only having Blythe's perspective and not Fox's, but like he could also just like, yeah, there's the infidelity portion of it, but like also again, like he could be seeing stuff that we're not seeing, and he just is probably like, shit, like she's not a good mother to this baby, what, she's not gonna be a good mother to the next one, you know, like he's probably just like,
that's true, like doesn't want to like relive all that again.
Yeah,
it's very true.
So like another thing with that too, do you remember that part in the book when Sam or Blythe gets up in the middle of the night and Violet's in Sam's room? This is like kind of in the beginning, right after she gave birth to Sam. Like, and she was like terrified that Violet was in there because like Violet obviously has these like violent tendencies that
she was like hiding in the dark. Like it was sketchy.
Yeah. Well, the thing that pissed me off about that is, so like Blythe took Sam into her room after that, but then like nothing else happened. They just all of a sudden started putting him back in the crib. I would never trust that child near Sam ever. Like she just kind of like went on and like there was nothing else like mentioned about that.
Yeah.
And like I would be terrified to ever have Violet possibly be alone with him. Like I would have Sam sleep with me every single night.
Yeah, or like move his crib into your room.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And then like we'll get into like the push of this book, but like right before that happens, Violet tells Blythe that she doesn't want Sam anymore.
Exactly. And that happened a while before the push even happened.
Yeah.
Like how could you like let this kid be alone ever? Like,
I mean, the fact that she saw Violet push this kid off of a playground, or like she's fairly certain that she did, and then when she says, I don't want Sam anymore, like all of your red flags should go up in that moment.
I think, like, again, we don't know if Blythe is, like, unreliable, but I would, no matter what my husband said, if I know what I saw, that child would be getting help immediately.
Yeah.
Like, if my husband disagreed, you're going to have to, like, therapy doesn't hurt anyone. Like, you know, like.
Yeah. Like, it's not
Get
going to
the child-
traumatize her. If
exactly.
anything, it'll do the opposite.
Exactly. Get the child help. Like,
Yeah. Okay. Should we get into the push?
yeah.
Okay. The obvious push in this book. So, one day Blythe is on a walk with Sam in the stroller and then Violet alongside her. They go to a coffee shop and Blythe gets like a hot tea to take while they're like strolling around. And while they're waiting at a stoplight, Blythe like reaches up to like drink her hot tea and Violet like bumps her arm kind of and she like kind of spills it on herself. And then she swears that she sees Violet, like her little pink mittens, like go on the stroller and push Sam out onto the like oncoming traffic.
Yeah, it wasn't a bump though. She like pulled her arm. Because like a bump could be like accident. I think she like grabbed her arm.
She did kind of grab her, was like,
Yeah.
"Mommy," or something. And then she was like all distracted. She's got hot tea, like scalding her.
On her face. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Sam's stroller goes onto the road and he's killed instantly.
Yeah. And like Blythe is like going through her head like how this could have happened. And like there's like a lip on like the curb
Yeah.
where like the stroller would have stopped. Because like she has issues getting that stroller over that like bump on the side of the curb. So and so like that convinces her more that he was pushed. But yeah, like
because he couldn't have just rolled. Like there was something like kind of stopping him from just like moving. And then like later on in the book, because she never really gets over this, but like she is going on that like same walk like later on, and there isn't a lip there anymore. Like,
oh really?
Yeah, like that's at the very end of the book, but yeah. So then she's kind of like starting to second guess herself, and then that's again going back to like, is Blythe a reliable narrator?
Yeah, okay.
Like, was
that
there?
Makes sense.
But so she swears there was a lip there, or she thought there actually was, like in the moment, and there was, but then there isn't anymore. So it's like, weird. Did they smooth it out? Why did that happen? Did they redo the sidewalks or something? Like, what's going on here? But
weird.
Anyway, just wanted to like mention that while we're like on the topic. But yeah, so Sam's killed. She's like crushed. Like life is never the same after this moment. She doesn't even like, she's so angry about what she saw that she doesn't even bother to like protect Violet at all. Like she just tells the police and Fox like, I saw Violet push Sam.
Exactly.
And they're like, oh, you're grieving. Like you didn't really see that. Like they gaslight her. Again, perfect word for this book. But like they just don't like really believe anything that she's trying to say. And they just think that she's like seeing things because she's so like distraught.
Which pisses me off because I feel like this could just be me like being too much of a feminist. But like if a man said that, I feel like they would be believed more than the woman.
That's very true.
Do you kind of like feel like that?
I guess
especially because the police officers were men too. Like I feel like they would have taken her more seriously if like Fox would have said that.
I think there is definitely like that stereotype of like women are like overly dramatic.
Yeah.
So exactly. I could see where you're coming from with that. I guess like when I read this, I didn't go to like the gender thought, but like,
I didn't either. I just thought came of that to you right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that like because people just think women are so like overreactive and irrational. Like I could see how they would like kind of poo-poo like her story.
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's wrecked, understandably so. And she talks a little bit about how Fox and like her in-laws are grieving, but because she's a narrator and she's going through it firsthand, like we mostly hear about how she is dealing with it, which is not well. Like she has this moment where she like cuts her stomach with a knife. Like she like bleeds and she's like rubbing blood all over herself. Like she's just really like going through it basically. Like she says she wants to like feel what it's like to like go through a death or like to be injured because she's just like so upset about it happening to Sam that she's like, I need to feel like this pain. Like it's just really sad.
Mm-hmm.
And like Fox knows she's not doing well with it. Like she's completely removed from like her motherhood duties at this point to Violet. Like she's still angry at Violet. She thinks she did it. Like she's not even going to bother to like try to be a mom at this point. And also like she is grieving, so there's that part too. Like she's just not present
Yeah.
emotionally. So then she goes to this like wellness retreat or like rehab or something for like her grief. They like recommend that she should stay there like long term, but she's like, no, I want to go home.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that really does like a whole lot for her.
Well, remember that weird scene like right before she like left where she like went into like the river or something like naked?
Oh, maybe I remember that. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think
And people
back.
thought she was like that's kind of like how it goes into like how she could be unreliable with everything because yeah, she kind of just like had a moment where she like she like took off
Like
all her
out
clothes
of
in front
body
of
experience,
everyone
kind of.
and went into like the river. And then everyone like found her like naked.
Oh, I must have zoned out during that part.
Yeah.
I've read this twice. I don't remember that, but if that sounds right. Yeah, yeah. She's just like not well, and then she starts like going to, or maybe she just goes one time, but she goes to like this group therapy for parents that have like children that have committed crimes,
Mm-hmm.
and she talks about like her daughter as if she's like older, and says that
Yeah.
her daughter like stole something because she doesn't want to like go in there and be like, my daughter's a murderer, and like she's, I don't know, 6 or whatever, like 8. Like I can't remember how old she was when she did that, but she's like kind of lying to these people like what really happened. I don't know if she's just trying to like find a way to relate to somebody that has like a similar situation, but that therapy session doesn't do much for her really,
Yeah.
because she's not being honest, first of all. So how can you
Exactly.
get through something if you're not like addressing what situation you really are in?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, so Blythe like at this point starts to notice like changes in Fox's behavior.
Mhm.
Fox tells Blythe that he resigned from his job so he can have like more creative freedom. And he like left his computer on like the coffee table or something, and she started snooping through his emails, and she sees that he was actually fired due to an HR incident with another woman.
Mhm.
And that just like immediately like brought me back to the assistant Gemma.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Because like around this time too, like he was like staying out really, really late. He was like
Yeah.
going on runs, so he was like taking care of himself way more than normal, which
Instant like red flag about that too. Like
yeah. And he's like dressing nicer.
dressing up for a night. Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird.
So like not surprised when this happens, but
Yeah.
she just like crawls into Violet's bed and like cries because
Mhm.
she's like, that's horrible to have to realize that that's happening in your marriage.
Exactly. So she confronts him about it and he tells her that he isn't seeing the woman anymore. But he still is having like weird behavior in the weeks following, and Blythe kind of like knows that he's like still with the woman.
Yeah. She just kind of like turns like a blind eye to it. Like she doesn't.
I don't think she cares anymore.
Yeah. I think she's just so over everything.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know. They're just kind of coexisting.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think Sam's death killed their marriage, or do you think they were having like issues before?
I think they were having issues before. I mean, going
Mhm.
back to like how he goes out to eat with like the receptionist
Yep,
and
that
Violet,
happened
like
before.
yeah, and he's spending like long days at the office, like spending all this time with like his receptionist. Like I definitely think he either started like his affair with her before Sam or was like definitely thinking about it. I don't think that Sam's death like was the reason that he had an affair. I think it certainly didn't help, like, right? Like Blythe's not even present like emotionally in their relationship or isn't present for Violet. Like I think it's probably a nail in the coffin, but I don't think it's like the reason why he took that step.
Yeah, and also too, like they say that like if there's like the death of a child, like like tears apart marriages. So like
That's
you
what the
really have.
doctors told them.
Yep, and it's actually like a known like thing. So like you have to really work on
Yeah.
like going to therapy and like just you have to try extra hard to keep that relationship intact.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just inevitable. Like it just won't, it doesn't work, which is so sad and
Yeah.
scary. But
Back to like to why Fox is such like a piece of shit is like when he sends like Blythe off to this wellness retreat and stuff, like I'm pretty sure we were like, I don't know if you felt this way, but like I was thinking that like he's just trying to get rid of her so he can like continue with his like infidelity.
yeah,
And in that scenario, they should have been, like you said, going to therapy. They should have been dealing with it as a family. And he was just kind of pushing her aside, like, you need to deal with your shit, like, away from our home.
yeah,
Kind of. I mean, not like shitting on therapy or like going to rehab or anything, but like, it just didn't seem like something she should have had to go through alone.
yeah, exactly. I agree with that.
Yeah. So they separate. I don't know if we said that, but it doesn't last. They can't keep up their like fake marriage any longer, and he moves out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they like have 50-50 custody over
Mhm.
Violet.
Yeah, and Blythe's like fine with that. She's like,
I was so like, because she doesn't even really want to have a relationship with Violet at this point. So I was just kind of like,
yeah. After
why do you
Sam's
want
death, she's just
50-50?
yeah.
Yeah.
Probably though, because like she still like goes through the motions of being a mother. Like
Exactly. And I wanted to bring this up too at like the end, but since we're like on the topic, like such a huge difference between like her grandmother and her mother. Like they never even tried to have a relationship with their children, but like even though Blythe, even she like knows how Violet is, and like Violet's like scary to be around, and
yeah,
she's has like these violent tendencies, and she's probably a sociopath. Like she still tries. She tries
yeah,
hard
she
to
does try.
still develop this connection, and she
Mhm.
like doesn't give up, which I think she definitely is like trying to break the cycle with that. And I think she in a sense has, but like Violet just doesn't want
Yeah,
this relationship with her mother.
yeah. I think we probably should have reiterated that more. As like even though we're kind of like she's not present, like she's still like trying, going through the motions.
Yeah.
She wants to be a good mom.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there's like this kind of overarching question through the whole thing is like, are we really getting the whole story?
But to be fair though, like everything that she's done except the 2-hour crying incident
yeah,
and the Binky one is like a little it's I think that's fine. But like she is a good mom in the
yeah,
sense like she's trying.
yeah,
Like that's all that matters is that you're trying,
right.
And like she tries to like comfort her in her bed. She tries to like lay with her. She tries to like rub her hair and like brush her hair, and like she's like trying to have this relationship
Yeah,
like with like these intimate like
yeah. It's
I don't
I feel like from the start, like Violet's never wanted it.
know. No, I agree
She
with
doesn't
that.
want anything to do with Blythe ever.
But why? That's the thing,
And there's like at one point too, like this is like when Blythe and Fox were still together. I can't remember when it happens, but like I think Blythe hears Violet tell Fox that she doesn't want like Blythe as her mom anymore.
Oh, she
Or,
says
like,
it a lot, I think.
yeah, and then
Yeah,
he's just like, "Don't say that. That's your mother." And it's like, again, like I would hope my husband would be angry about that. Like you don't
exactly.
say that about your mom.
Yeah.
No matter how young you are, that's not okay. Like you have to, there has to be consequences for saying shit like that. And he
Okay,
doesn't even
but like,
bother to like mend the relationship.
what if like Blythe said that though to her dad about Cecilia? Would you think that that's okay?
Oh, that's a little different.
Yeah. So I think like in some instances,
I mean,
like,
I think still like as a parent you should be like don't say that about your mom, but like that's a little bit different cuz she was being
but
abused.
why can't she express her feelings but Cecilia can? Just because she's a child, I don't think that's like fair that she can't express her feelings that she doesn't want to be in her mom's life. Because Cecilia obviously showed her that she didn't want anything to do with Blythe.
Yeah, I
So like,
mean, that's different, right? Like there's abuse happening here and stuff and like
yeah,
those are valid feelings if you don't feel safe around somebody and like you don't want to live under the same roof as somebody that slaps you and like verbally abuses you, like that's understandable.
I was
If
just countering when you said like I don't think it's fine that any child should like
well,
say
I just
that.
more so like I think as like a parent, if you hear your child say that about the other parent, like you should probably be like, don't say that, Like, do you think Seb, like her dad, should have been like, Oh, yeah, I totally agree.
No, I think Sub should have taken her out of the situation.
Yeah, he should have.
Not trying to force that relationship to happen when obviously it's not going to.
Yeah.
So I think he should have taken her out of that situation like way before that.
Yeah, they should have never been in that position for that long to begin with.
Yeah, for that to even be like a thought on the child's mind.
Yeah.
Like
It shouldn't have gotten to that point.
exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that Fox handled that very well.
Mm-mm.
He's just never been there for Blythe. They've never been a
Nope.
team.
Not once. So I can't remember. Did we get into Violet tells Blythe that Fox and the other woman are living together? Yeah, so they're living together. Oh yeah, because we were going into that. They have 50-50 custody. So
Mhm.
I think Blythe gets her on the weekends and then Fox has her during the week or something like that. But Blythe wants to kind of get to know Gemma.
Mhm.
And so she like spies on her and they go to like this woman or this mother's group or something. And she like she's undercover and like befriends Gemma as like a different like identity.
Yeah.
And which is a little crazy.
Yeah, that's what I was like, oh my God, this woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, she like wears a wig to these like mom group events, and then this happens for a full year that she pretends to be friends with Gemma.
Yeah.
And there's kind of two things that she's gaining out of this situation where she's learning more about Fox and Gemma's like new relationship. She learns that they got pregnant like when she was still with Fox. Like around the time that he was fired from his job is when Gemma got pregnant. And so like when they were still living together for like 3 months, Gemma was like pregnant with his baby like around that time. And then they separated, he left and moved in with Gemma, or like they got a place together.
Mhm.
And so she like finds out that Gemma has like a young boy named Jet. So she's like getting all this information about their new life together. And like Gemma like gushes about how great like Fox is and everything. And then the other thing that Blythe is getting out of this situation is she gets to like live in this fantasy world where she has a son that's alive, because she tells Gemma like, oh, I have a 4-year-old boy named Sam, which thought it was kind of odd that she used like his real name, because like
Such a common name.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It didn't like disclose anything, but like
Exactly.
yeah, she gets to like hang out with Gemma and pretend like she has this son. Like that's the age that Sam would have been if he had lived. And
Yeah.
so she's like getting this kind of like fake like fantasy world out of it.
Yeah,
almost.
I think that was like the most addicting part of it for her. She just
Yeah.
wanted Sam to be alive. And also, like we mentioned earlier, she doesn't have friends or family. So she was like really enjoying that relationship with Gemma, even though it was kind of based on
Yeah, they had
a
like
fake.
a real friendship despite that she was lying to her the entire time.
Exactly. Yeah. And she's never really had that. So I think that's
Yeah.
why she just kind of kept it going.
Yeah, and she never like really says anything bad about Gemma. Like she's not like pretending to be Gemma's friend and then goes home and is like, I fucking hate that bitch. Like
She
she's
stole my husband.
yeah, like she's like talking about how Gemma like is like captivating person, like how she's always like putting her hands on people when she's talking to them like very lovingly and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of interesting how Blythe doesn't hate her.
Yeah.
She like, almost wants to be friends with her. Like it's odd.
Yeah.
Not healthy at all to be going through this like ruse.
Yeah, so Blythe, I'm always going to say Blythe. Blythe, her identity gets discovered when Gemma has her meet Fox after the mom group one evening. And Fox doesn't like give it away, but he's like kind of like, what the fuck?
Well, yeah, he like gets all like standoffish and like rude almost. And then Gemma is kind of like uncomfortable because she's like, why is my husband like behaving like this to this woman I'm introducing him to? And then Blythe like literally runs.
Yeah.
Like she just like books it out of there. And like we know for sure like he told Gemma about it like probably that night.
For sure. Yeah, so weeks later, Gemma wants to talk to Blythe, and Blythe tells her like everything that happened with Sam, and Gemma, and Violet too. Like I think she like kind of told her what she thinks
she
Violet
didn't like
did.
lie to her or like sugarcoat it at all. She's like, this is exactly what I saw when Sam died.
Exactly.
Yeah, Gemma just like walks away. She doesn't say anything.
Mm-hmm. But similar things start to happen in Gemma's household because they
Yeah.
just had a baby Jet.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, things are happening between Violet and Jet.
Yeah, which like Gemma at first kind of like blames Blythe for, because there's like the first incident where Gemma like finds Jet playing in their laundry room with one of those like X-Acto knives that um the husband uses because he's an
Mm-hmm.
architect to like make his models. He uses these like little sharp knives to like build them.
Yeah.
And so we know that like Violet snuck into Blythe's bedroom one night and like took it out of a drawer. I think like Blythe must have taken it at some point from her or like hid it from Fox because she didn't want them out in the house like for the kids to find.
Yeah.
And so like Violet steals it from the house and then like gives it to Jet. And then Gemma calls Blythe and is like, I found this in my house. I don't let Fox keep them here. So like Violet took it from your house and brought it here. Like you need to be more careful. Was like
Mhm.
blaming Blythe for it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
But like Violet's old enough to know like that's not okay at this point.
Yeah. It's like, why wouldn't you punish her for giving it to Jet in the first place?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I don't know. That was handled pretty poorly. But then the book kind of wraps up and we're back to this moment where like Blythe is watching them through the window again and she sees like Violet get up against the window and like make eye contact with her and she mouths, I pushed him.
Over and over again.
Yeah. And then I think like Blythe's like, what was that? Like
she like
mouthing
gets
back to
closer
her.
to the
and,
window
and Violet just like demon child like looks at her and like walks away.
yeah.
Do you think she actually mouthed that, or do you think like Blythe just thinks that's what she saw?
No, she did it. She
think
mouthed
so?
it. Do you?
We'll have to get into like if we feel like Blythe's a reliable main character or not, right? But like I believe that that's what Blythe thinks she saw.
Okay.
But we'll get into it. I'm so torn if that's really happening or not. But like
Oh, I definitely am like 100% positive.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then the very, very last thing that really happens with this book is like a year and a half goes by. Blythe like gets her shit together. She's like going to therapy. She's finding healing from like her situation. She's like meditating and eating salad like in her free time. It just seems like she's doing a lot better. She's getting like the help that she really needed. But then she gets a phone call from Gemma and she's like crying and frantic. And she tells Blythe that like something happened to Jet and then the book ends.
Yeah. So I think Blythe is reliable just because like we're inside her head.
Yeah.
And like everything that she's seen.
Mm-hmm.
Like is it told from a perspective where she's like telling a story or is it like things going through her head? Like, like if it's like things going through her head, then I believe she's like reliable. But if it's like her like because like in the beginning of the book, it was like her like talking to her husband in a sense, and then it kind of changed. But like it's like everything going on in her head.
Well, do you think that so every time she's talking in the book, she's talking to Fox. So do you think that this whole book was like her letter to him? Because when it skips forward to like a year and a half later, it's not in second person point of view anymore. It's like she answered the call from Gemma. It's not I answered the call from Gemma.
Yeah, I can't remember.
So I was just like I was kind of thinking that throughout the book that like this book was like quote unquote like her letter to Gemma and Fox to tell her side of the story.
Okay, maybe. I guess I didn't really like catch that.
That's just I don't think it's like super super obvious, but that's kind of like where my head was at because like the last 2 minutes of the book, she's like not narrating it anymore. It's like somebody else is narrating like her picking up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's kind of get into like what you started mentioning is like, in your opinion, like, do you think like she's a reliable main character or do you think like Violet's actually like a real threat to society?
I think the only mental illness that she had was postpartum depression.
Yeah.
And that obviously went away when she had Sam.
Yeah.
But then when Sam died, she, I think, got depressed again. But I don't necessarily I don't necessarily think that depression makes you like an unreliable source. That's kind of saying like if you have depression, nothing you say is like real.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with that. So I do think she's reliable, and I think Violet is a sociopath.
Yeah. So I agree with you. Like both times I read this book, I was like, yeah, she has postpartum. Like she's obviously dealing with like a lot of trauma from her own past. And I do think that Violet really did those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the author is trying to make you really think hard about it. And that's why
Oh, for sure.
we needed to discuss this is like the whole time, like, especially reading it the second time around, I was like thinking about it a little bit more, just like, okay, like, what if she's actually unreliable? Like,
Yeah.
that exists out there in the story, like, where you wonder that.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, I agree with you. I think, like, Violet is a sociopath. Like, she is, like, demon child. Like, Blythe has moments where maybe she shouldn't have behaved a certain way, like with like we keep going back to like the how Violet screamed for like over 2 hours, but like overall, like I don't think she's a bad mom, and like I think that Violet actually really did do these things. I just think that the author is trying to create this big question in our heads of like, is Blythe like mentally ill or not?
Yeah, and I think like the author confirms that with you at the end that she's a reliable source by three things. Like one, when Violet said that she was melding that she pushed him.
Mhm.
Two, when Fox starts to talk about what he saw with Violet and her cutting up the clothes. And then three, like when Gemma calls and says that something happened to Jet. I think those are like three times where it's like really like, yeah, Violet is.
Yeah, I think the call from Gemma is really like what solidifies that theory. Like I agree with you.
Because it's outside perspectives on like what they saw with Violet.
Yeah.
And do you think like, so like it kind of mentions it in the book, do you think that Fox's mother noticed anything? Because she kind of acted weird about Violet at some points in the book,
Mhm.
but like didn't really want to like admit it. Like, do you think
Yeah.
that she saw anything with Violet? Because I know Blythe questioned that too.
Yeah, I think like especially with like the bathtub moment where she saw like Violet like act very violently towards Blythe when she bit her and stuff. I definitely think she was like that's not normal. Like
Yeah.
this relationship they have. But I was a little bit sketched out by the mother-in-law because she just like she acted like all trustworthy to Blythe, but then every time like Blythe would try to confide in her, like she would tell Fox. So then it was just kind of like, do we love the mother-in-law? Like because she's not really somebody that Blythe can truly confide in, right? Because she's
Yeah.
just taking everything that Blythe's telling her and is like like reiterating it to Fox and is like they're talking about her behind her back, like, oh, she's not well. Like they're kind of insinuating that that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it comes from a good place. Like maybe she's genuinely concerned for Blythe, but like they never try to help her. So that's why I feel like it's kind of like malicious a little bit.
Yeah. Well, they tried to help her once, and that was with the night nurse, but that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to like, is Violet a real threat to society? Yes, I think she is. It's kind of obvious that she's a sociopath. And like, I kind of did some research on that. Like, what makes a sociopath a sociopath? And like, are they like born with that or are they created? And like, from the research that I've done, a lot of it is said that they're like created by like trauma and abuse and everything. So like, that kind of goes into the fact like, okay, so did Blythe go wrong in early childhood? Like what trauma and like that? I think that also like brings up the point like, is she a reliable source? Because like, is she not including stuff that actually happened? Like I think this would confirm it more if we did have Fox's perspective on it.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what other trauma did Violet go through? And it had to have been such early childhood because she's kind of been terrible since a toddler. So like, was it one of the instance when she didn't get like any nurturing, when she was just crying?
Yeah.
Like, was that part of it too? Like, it's just
Yeah.
so like, if a sociopath is created, like something had to have gone wrong. Like she had to have experienced some kind of trauma, and I guess that would be a form of trauma.
Like the postpartum like inadvertently like affected Violet as well. Like just the lack of relationship.
But we don't, yeah, I mean, we don't really see like any, besides like being left to cry for so long, like anything that like any trauma
Yeah,
that
because
she experienced.
yeah, it's like even though she was going through all those emotions, like she was still trying really hard to like be the mother that she needed to be to Violet. Like she really tried to like have a
Exactly.
relationship with her and stuff. I know it's just like a big question mark, but um yeah, oh my gosh. Well, back to like how we learn that like Violet really is like a threat to society with like the phone call from Gemma and how that wasn't in second person point of view. So like that's not like Violet or that's not Blythe being like an unreliable main character like telling us that that happened and like she could have been like hallucinating it or something. She doesn't because that actually happened. That was like third person point of view.
Yeah.
So that's real. And there's like this point in the book where Violet is like downstairs in the basement with Blythe of their house, and she sees like a big thing of bleach,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, "Why do you have that around the house? Like it's so dangerous." And so like we never learned what happened to Jet, like if he's okay or not, but like I'm fairly certain that like Violet like gave him bleach.
Yeah, that's a good point because nothing ever happened with the bleach after that.
Yeah,
And like they made it like a very like,
it was like an obvious
yeah,
conversation the two
yeah,
of them
exactly.
had.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with
I
that.
hope he's okay.
I
I mean, this
know.
isn't real. This
I
is a
want to
book, but
know.
like, yeah, give us a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we were kind of all over the place with that conversation, but just kind of driving home, like this book really makes you think, like, what's going on here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so a lot of horrible things happen in the book. What kind of feelings did you have like while reading it?
So like I said, I read this book twice. The first time I read it, I cranked through the whole thing in one night. Like I started at 9 p.m. on like a Saturday and just like didn't put it down because this book is like very fast to read. Like every other page is literally a new chapter.
Yeah.
And so I flew through it. The entire time I was uncomfortable. Like because not only are all these like horrible things happening, like young children are being murdered, like there's infidelity, like it's just like a mother's worst nightmare is exactly how I would describe this book. Like you lose your husband, you lose one of your children, your other child's like a sociopath. Like this is every mom's worst nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very uncomfortable. Even like the writing style makes you uncomfortable because everything that the author has Blythe describe is like very gruesome. Like she always talks about like her body in such like a not like a morbid way, but it's very unflattering everything that she describes. Like she's like my nipples after breastfeeding look like ground hamburger meat. Like even though that's like
Yeah.
true, it's still like uncomfortable to read.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'd feel a little bit differently about it if I was a mother and like had gone through breastfeeding and everything. But like that's just one example of like the many ways that Blythe describes stuff in this book. It's just like you're meant to be uncomfortable reading this. So when I finished it like that first time, I was like laying in bed. I was like, oh, like that was a heavy book. And I was like, I don't know if I liked that. And then the next day, I like thought about it and I was like, holy cow, like that was a really good book. So, long story short, like I was very uncomfortable, but I appreciated like the writing.
Yeah.
What about you? How did this book make you feel?
I kind of agree with a lot of what you said. Like reading it made you very uncomfortable. It kind of makes you like, because we're not mothers, like we don't have any children, but like it makes you like kind of scared.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what to expect. We don't know what it's like. And I think that's really scary, like reading it because it's like, oh shit, is that going to happen to me?
Yeah.
Like, but yeah. Yeah, it was uncomfortable at times.
Yeah. And the author was trying to do that. This book was meant to make you like cringe the whole way through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like looking at the cover of the book, like what do you think that's alluding to?
So that's such a good question. Like the front of it, it's like ink splotches where it's meant to look like one of those images like when you go to a therapist's office and they're like, what do you see? So like the obvious part of it is like the two faces, right? That are like
they're mirroring each other.
Yeah, they're mirroring each other. And like you and I kind of talked about this a little bit before, how like it kind of looks like maybe it's like two moms, like, and it's kind of going back to that question of like, is history repeating itself with her role as a
Mhm.
mother versus like how her mom and then her grandma was as a mom.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was thinking. The other thing too that is interesting is, do you think like the part at the top, like in between the two heads, looks like a uterus and like fallopian tubes?
Oh, yeah. Kind of. Yeah, like this part right here, like the space.
Yeah.
Yep.
It looks like kind of like vagina, like uterus, tubes, like,
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't
isn't
notice
it?
that before, but yeah, it does. Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. This book just making us think.
Yeah. So the title is The Push. Do you think that's just referring to like Sam's horrific accident, or do you think there's other points in the book that could have been like a push?
Yeah, I think there was a push to be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think she was against it. We talked about that earlier, but I definitely think like Fox kind of pushed her, maybe not into being a mom totally, but to being like a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
Um, what else? What do you think? What
I
pushes
have a
did you see?
list.
Oh, you do? Okay, you go, and I'll see if I can think of anything else.
Yeah. So obviously, like the most obvious one is the literal like pushing of the
Yep.
stroller. Like you kind of said too, the push of like motherhood and like the social conditioning of like what defines a mother. Like
Hmm.
that's a push. And Fox like pushing Blythe to form this relationship with Violet. Like every time she's like admitting that like Violet isn't like conforming to her.
Yeah.
That's not the right word, but like isn't like taking to Blythe. Like he's just like pushing her like no, it will come, like the bond will be there. Just keep trying like um and then the push of both babies like coming out of her, like giving birth. Like
Oh,
that's like
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Especially going back to the cover of the book with like the whole
Yeah.
kind of like
It's a
pregnancy
uterus. Yeah.
aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. And then this one's just kind of like a little added one, but like Violet is constantly pushing her mother's buttons all the time. Like she
Yeah,
is just
true.
pushing her to the edge, like to her limit
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And
Yeah.
like she like Violet thrives off of making Blythe. God, I said Blythe in my head the whole time reading this.
That's okay.
But she's like constantly like she thrives off of making Blythe uncomfortable
Yeah. She's always like
and
waiting to
pushing her
get
to
a
her limit.
reaction out of her.
Exactly. So yeah, that's all I have for that.
Nope, that's
Need to
good.
add.
I think you got pretty much all of them. If there's other ones, I can't think of them. So
Honestly, a lot of things in this book could be like
you could, yeah,
contribute.
argue that.
Yeah, as it's like a push. But
Yeah. Yep. Well, that was a lot. We unpacked that whole book.
yeah.
What are your like final thoughts on it? Did you like this book?
So going with my rating too, when I first read it, I gave it a 2. I was just like,
Yeah, you texted me. You're like, I didn't like it.
I didn't, because I just thought it was so predictable of what would happen. And it just, at times it was like boring to read, but like after talking about it and like really like diving into it and like getting into like the deep hidden meanings with it, I would probably bump it up to like a 3.5
Okay.
from a 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at first I didn't like it. Now it's like after like uncovering all these hidden meanings and like actually having time to like think it through and like talk about it with you, I think yeah, it's not as boring as it may have seemed while reading it.
Yeah. It's fun to not maybe fun's not the right not word to, fun to talk about, but
It's interesting.
it's interesting to talk about.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about you?
Like I said, the first time I read it, like that night when I finished it, I was like, ooh, like that was rough reading that. Like
Mhm.
none of that was very enjoyable to read. But then and now, like I realized like how well this book is written, like how the author really like puts you through a journey
Yeah.
of like your feelings of being uncomfortable, all the horrible things that happen, how it just really makes you like dive deep into these characters and like just really analyzing Blythe. Like I give it a 5. I did then, I do now, because it's just like so well crafted, this book, that I appreciate it. Is it enjoyable to read? Not necessarily all the time, but I couldn't put it down. It put me through so much. Like, I appreciate everything that this book is. So yeah, 5.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a lot to unpack. Have you read anything else recently?
I just finished listening to Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed. So she used to be a columnist. Have you ever heard of Dear Sugar?
Mm-mm.
So it was like an advice column that like people could write to or email her like questions, and she'd like give advice. And so
Okay.
it was like featured in, I can't remember if it was like a newspaper, magazine, or online or something. But so this book is like a compilation of a bunch of like people that have reached out to her for things and like her response. So the
Okay.
entire thing is like just reading like these advice columns
Oh, nice.
that she wrote. So I listened to it, and it was really nice to listen to, because I don't think I could like sit down and like read that book all the way through. Like, you'd have to definitely be like in the mood for that sort of thing. However, I have a friend that's reading it right now, and she was saying that she like kind of reads like one a night. So it's kind of more of like that kind of book. It's not like a binge book. It's like a get something out of it, like every once in a while. It was super interesting because like some of the things that these people are doing, I was like, holy shit, like the tea. But then other times, like, it made me want to cry, because like there was one where people were writing about like losing like a loved one and stuff, and like that's always like tough to read about. And then there was like a part where she gets asked like by this woman, like, I'm in my 20s, like what would you tell yourself like in your 20s? And then she goes into like all these things. So there was like a lot of moments in this book where I just felt very validated and felt like very like seen. And then other times I was like, again, like, ooh, the tea.
Yeah.
So it was just really interesting. And she has kind of like unconventional ways of like giving people advice, where it's not so straight and narrow. Like, she's pretty understanding and progressive about stuff. So it's just like, it was really interesting, like her responses that she gave these people.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that really stuck with me is she was like, oh my God, I'm going to botch it. How did she say it? But like, when she was asked, like, what would she tell her 20-year-old self? She said, like, love moves freely in both directions, or flows freely in both directions. And like, that just really stuck with me, because that's something that I learned, like, going through like relationships, like in my early 20s, or like even in high school. Like, that's so true. Like, you really find like the person you're meant to be with when it's easy,
Yeah.
where like you care about them so much, like they care about you. Like, nobody's forcing anything on the other, or like you're not sitting there like wondering like, oh, does he like me? Doesn't he like me? Like, he does. You know what I mean? Like, that's something I learned with like my husband and why we're married. Like,
Mm-hmm.
love moved freely in both directions. Like, that's just such a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, that was kind of a long-winded answer.
No, that's okay. I want to read it.
Well, here's the thing too, is that on April 7th, the Hulu series comes out on it.
Oh, really?
And it stars Catherine Hahn, who I
Okay.
love. Like, do you know who that is? She's an actress.
Mm-mm.
You know in Step Brothers?
Yeah.
The movie Step Brothers, where she's like, there's that one wife where she's like, I want to roll you up into a tiny ball and stick you in my vagina.
Oh, yeah. That's her. Oh, gosh. That's
She's
so funny.
just such a great actress, because she's so funny. But like, this is obviously going to be a more like serious role.
Yeah.
I don't know how the series is going to go, because it's based on the book, and the book is just a bunch of advice. But like, I think it's more about like her life, because like she went through a lot in her life too, which is I think why she's able to like give such good advice on things. But anyway, we should watch it and talk about it maybe.
Yeah,
but
for
like,
sure. Yeah, I want to read it, I think, first before I watch it.
You would really like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was a lot. I just ranted, but
no, that's okay.
It's
you
like,
made it
that's
sound really interesting.
5 stars.
Nice.
It was good.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to add that to the TBR.
Yeah. Have you read anything recently?
No, but the sweet little soul over here bought me the Crescent City series for my birthday, so I'm going to start that today. Thank you so much. I love you.
You're welcome. I love you. I'm so excited for you to read those books.
I was so
good.
shocked you didn't have to get me anything.
Yes, I did.
Oh
and the
gosh.
bookmark.
Yes, the bookmark too is literally my favorite. It's so cute.
It's ACOTAR themed.
Yeah.
Does it spoil ACOTAR for people if we tell them what the bookmark says?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I don't think we should say.
Sorry.
But we can tell them if we when we talk about ACOTAR on the
Yeah.
podcast after the second book, we can
Okay.
display the bookmark.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much it for us today. Thank you for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, please subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, leave some comments down below if you want to continue this conversation. There's, like I said earlier, like we said earlier, there was so much to unpack with this book. So we'd love to hear your thoughts after reading it. Go check out our social media to get the drink recipe. And yeah, again, I'm Paige.
And I'm Emily. And next week we're reading The Queen of Nothing.
Yep.
By Holly Black.
Yeah,
the
that's
third book in the Folk of the Air series.
Yep, the last one. So we will wrap that series up and move on.
Yeah, we'll start letting you know what we're going to be reading next. So going into the summer.
All right. Well, thank you for hanging out with us in the Literary Lounge, and we'll see you next week.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye.